Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome. This is my end of month recap for July 2024. Before I get into the usual recap contents, I will just say I am very much in vacation mode right now. This will probably be a bit more all over the place than usual. I've tried to organize myself a little bit in terms of having a list of the books that I've read this month. I have the one deck I received this month to show you, and I have my deck wish list here to update on. But in terms of general life updates, which is where I'm going to start, I anticipate being all over the place. July has been a weird month, and it's now a week into August, which is later than I usually film these recaps. I have been in a strange kind of in-between place throughout July of being on vacation and also feeling not always like I've been on vacation. I did take a couple of weeks off work this month, 2 non-consecutive weeks. I get some vacation time at my job, and so I try to take some of that during the sunny weather so that I can go swimming and do things that I don't always get to do, which has been great. I haven't gone anywhere really or done much in terms of notable activities or anything like that. I've done some things around the house. I've mostly just tried to have some time to relax and enjoy the season. At the same time, this month, my partner has made fully the shift from being employed to self-employed, and so that's been a huge part of the month for me, as I have aimed to be supportive and helpful. And it's been a huge change in terms of routine, especially around, I'm sure anyone who runs their own business of any sort will understand this, having a lot more things that need to be done kind of outside the regular work day. So for all of the years that we've lived together, we've both had, a day job, a Monday to Friday day job. And this past month has really felt very different from that because there's invoices to make and scheduling to do. My partner's a tradesperson, so booking jobs and pricing things, and it's a lot different in terms of a rhythm than going to work for someone else in a kind of 9 to 5 Monday to Friday sort of a way. And so that it has kind of felt like I've been on vacation, but also like work has been on the brain constantly, like all hours of the day, every day. It's just not my work that has been the focus. And it's been a little bit hard, if I'm honest, it's been a little bit hard to navigate that insofar as I've learned in the context of my own work that having a kind of work-life balance and some kind of demarcation where, I work and then I'm off, and when I'm off, I'm not working, that has become very important to me in the context of my work. But this past month really has not felt like that at all, because there's just always something to do, something to set up, something to get organized. And so, I've been trying to, take care of myself and support kind of a good work-life balance for everybody in the household, with an understanding, of course, that, our work-life balance needs might look a bit different from each other, and that's completely fine. While also, maintaining that I cannot be assisting with things maybe quite as much as I have been in the first month, particularly not kind of during evenings and things like that. And just trying to find that good balance and good rhythm that's going to work with our new arrangement in that way. And so that's been something. I got to take my partner shopping for a day planner, which I loved. That was probably my personally most enjoyable part of this past month with respect to the business starting up, was all of a sudden, feeling like needing a good day planner and calendar and kind of organizational system was going to be important. And so I got to help with that, and I quite enjoyed that. I have been enjoying spending time in our garden. I've been really just kind of hanging out, relaxing, doing some reading, doing a little bit of writing. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I've been spending a fair amount of time on Druidry related study and thinking about the shift that I will go through at some point in the future from my current degree in the AODA up to my next one, and feeling like that is getting closer and closer. There are things that I have kind of set out for myself that I wanted to do, in my current time as an apprentice before starting the process to move on to being a Druid companion. But I'm also realizing that those things that I had set out for myself are not really necessary for that process, and so I'm spending a lot of time kind of feeling into what I actually want to do and what I actually need to do before I make that, begin that shift. And so that's been a enjoyable process, a very reflective process. I have been spending a lot of time on geomancy as one of my practices in that context, and I've been working with this book, Astrological Geomancy, a fair amount. I've also been doing lots of astrology study, Hellenistic astrology in particular, astrology, and working with astrology and geomancy together as part of my Druid practice for my apprentice degree in particular, but is also just has become really part of my personal practice. And so I've been really, delving into that in terms of study, which has been really nice. There's the ramble. That's my July. I'm sure I'm missing things again, but there it is. So I received a new deck this month. I haven't had a new deck to show for some time, but I completely unexpectedly, totally surprised, was gifted a deck by my friend, and I'm really excited about this to show you. And the deck is the Tarot Neocolonial de las Americas by Patrick McGrath Munoz. And this is a deck that wasn't really on my radar much. I've been reading the guidebook. The guidebook is quite large. It is 90 pages. And this is a US Games deck. And the back of the box describes the deck as exploring a period when the New World and Old World collided, bringing about a turning point in human civilization and the dawn of globalization. The artist is Puerto Rican, and the back of the box describes him feeling compelled to address issues of social and economic struggle through his tarot art. And so the deck, of course, deals very much with colonialism and economic exploitation and racism and all of the kind of aspects of that history, right? And so I've been reading the guidebook. And this is a deck that I think very much needs this. And I'm through, how far am I? I'm through the major arcana and a little bit into the minor arcana. So I still have the deck in order. I have it set to be at the Ace of Wands. So I'll show you some of the wands. It has the multilingual titles at the bottom. And so I'm just getting to know kind of the angle that the creator comes from, which is really interesting. There's a lot of very pointed commentary in this deck in ways that thus far I really appreciate. I could give some examples from the majors. If I can get back to the majors without making a mess. Okay, here we go. So as an example of that kind of political aspect to this deck, you can see in the Devil, for example, that the Devil is standing on a television set that says faux news, and the people there are chained to their phones. And there's a forest fire in the background. And that one hit me in a particular sort of a way. But there's a lot of imagery. Like this, the moon card depicts a flood. You can see the dogs there on the roofs of the flooded houses. There's a lot of really clever, I think, takes on this. The world card, the four corners of the world card depict kind of aspects of colonialism, including illness and like the spreading of illness, the deliberate spreading of illness, weapons. There's a satellite, which is like steel and technology, and religion. There's a lot going on in these cards, and it's really fascinating to me to explore all of the details in this deck. The Wheel of Fortune card has has ruled, rules, will rule, has no rule, and the future one that will rule is robot, which I think is really interesting. There's a lot to discover in this deck. So I'm working through and reading the guidebook in full and really getting a lot out of that. So I'm really happy about this. Totally unexpected treat. It is one that I am surprised in some ways that this is mass market. Given that I feel like mass market publishers have not exactly been quick to pick up or engage with decks that are more challenging to oppressive status quo, we'll say. I don't think they have. I think we've seen certainly some decks go mass market that feature perhaps more diversity than has been featured previously. But a deck like this that has a very strong anti-colonial orientation to it, that has a very strong political orientation to it, I appreciate that this is mass market. And I can't really think of many or any others with anything like the extent of analysis that a deck like this has going mass market. So I'm really enjoying getting to know that. It feels like a kind of deep dive deck study because there is just so much detail, which is something, of course, that I love in a deck. So thank you to the friend who gifted this. I really, really appreciate it. Totally unexpected, and have been really, really enjoying getting to know this deck. I have read some books this month. I will tell you about those books. I have read, how many books have I read? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books. More books happen when I'm on vacation, clearly. And my reading this month is really, it has been all over the place. So there's quite the range. I will, as always, link to my book reviews below, which I'm doing on Goodreads and Storygraph for the time being. I read The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This book I did not give a star rating. I feel like trying to give a star rating to the written reflections of Marcus Aurelius that he never intended to be published, just felt a bit strange to me. I will say that they're very well organized. The edit is good. Robin Waterfield did the translation of this one. The footnotes are very thorough. I'm not sure to what extent to recommend this in terms of it being of interest to anybody who watches my channel. The context for me reading this is very much delving into Hellenistic astrology, and Marcus Aurelius being an author who very much ascribed to Stoic philosophy, and so this being a way into what Stoic philosophy looked like in practice, which had some influence on Hellenistic astrology with respect to things like how determinist or not that the underlying philosophy of the system of astrology is. So that's why I read this. I mean, if you are interested in Stoic philosophy or ancient philosophy or ancient Greek philosophy, or I would say if you are interested in Hellenistic astrology or any of the kind of traditional astrology, I would say that this is a good contextual read. It is in no way about astrology, to be clear, but it was interesting. It's really his writing, for himself as a way of kind of processing and thinking through things that he's experiencing or things that he's struggling with. He writes about, trying to deal with anger, trying to deal with grief, trying to deal with, feeling like he's allowing his feelings to guide him in ways that as a Stoic he doesn't think that they should. I am decidedly not a Stoic. I didn't read this to learn how to be a Stoic or expecting to agree with the outlook necessarily, but yeah, some of it is quite challenging. But I think it's a really interesting read as kind of a very personal text, and so I appreciated it in that way. And I haven't engaged with a lot of ancient philosophy since undergrad, which for me was 2005 to 2009. So, dipping back into that a little bit was nice, actually, I will say. I read Pantheologies, Gods, Worlds, Monsters by Mary Jane Rubenstein. This is a reread for me, and the reason that I reread this is because I made it a part of my apprentice Druidry curriculum for the AODA. We have a list of books that we are all assigned to read as apprentices, but we also pick a few books that we feel like will inform our own personal and spiritual philosophies as Druidry practitioners, and so I picked this as one of my books. One of my kind of self-chosen books. And I love this book. I've talked about this book before. Folks know I love this book. I think it's fantastic. I got more out of it the second time around. It is kind of a survey of pantheist thinking, but it is also a survey of reactions to pantheist thinking, dismissals of pantheist thinking, questioning why those dismissals are in fact so frequent, and the relationship between pantheism and the possibility of challenging some kind of constitutive binary ways of thinking about the world, arguably rooted in a kind of distinction between spirit and matter, or God and world, or creator and creation, right? And that's a rambly sum up. This will be a big part of my essay that I write, which I need to write before I can move on to being a companion in the order rather than apprentice. So I will be thinking on this for months to come as I work on that. I read Dilogun Tales of the Natural World, How the Moon Fooled the Sun, and Other Santeria Stories. I got this book on recommendation when I also got the Yami Oracle by Amina Oladipo, which I really love. It's a beautiful deck, beautiful indie oracle deck that feels very, very summer to me, and so I've been enjoying working with that deck, and I finally got around to reading this book. The deck has a guidebook, and I had picked up another book as well, but I finally got to this one. And as the title suggests, this is a collection of stories, sacred stories, that relate to nature in some way. So a lot of these are, stories about interactions between different animals, between different weather phenomena, that give a lesson, or that tell something about where someone or something originated. Some of the titles are things like how the frog got its poison, how the turtle won the race, why the sea is salty. And I really enjoyed reading these. There's a introduction about the importance of the Patakis and some kind of cultural context, historical context provided there, which I very much needed. I really enjoyed this. Very, very good. Very good. I would recommend this 100%. I read Kalpa Imperial by Angelica Gorodischer. This is a book that I mentioned putting on my reading list largely because it caught my eye that it was translated into English by Ursula Le Guin, who I love. The author is Argentinian, and it is somewhere between a novel and a collection of short stories. Maybe a little bit closer to a collection of short stories. There's definitely a kind of shared world to this book. But the sections they feel fairly distinct to me. The writing is beautiful. I can 100% see now, having read this, why Ursula Le Guin, and if you know Ursula Le Guin's work, you'll know what I mean. I can 100% see why Ursula Le Guin, given who she was as an author and as a thinker, why she would be attracted to a work like this. Why she would want to translate a work like this, 100%. I could not get into it. It started to feel repetitive after a while. I did have a bit of a hard time. I liked the writing. I really liked some sections, but it did start to drag for me. And yeah, so I struggled with it. I think if the description catches your eye and interests you, I would say to pick it up for sure. I did have a bit of a hard time, if I'm honest. I read Fire Spitter, She Who Knows by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a novella in She Who Knows is a series that is actually a prequel to a book that I have not read. I got this as an e-arc on NetGalley, thank you publisher, and so I decided to read it knowing that it was a prequel to something that I hadn't read, and I think that this stands quite well on its own. There's a tiny section at the end that I think would have made a lot more sense to me had I read the book that this is a prequel to. But other than that, this very much works as a standalone fantasy novella. It follows a young female protagonist who wants to go on the road to go and obtain and sell salt, which is something that in her community only men and boys do. And so it follows her journey there. And I won't say too much about it because, novellas are hard to describe without just totally giving everything away because they're so short. I quite like this. I think that this probably has some YA crossover appeal. Given that the protagonist is younger, it reads as adult to me. Like, I think it is classified accurately, but I could see someone who likes YA fantasy also enjoying this one in terms of it being a kind of coming of age in some ways of a younger protagonist navigating some sexist expectations, and so those themes I think would appeal. I liked this. I had initially not read the book that this is a prequel to because of some of the kind of content warnings attached to that book. Now that I've read the prequel, I do think I actually probably will read the other one, and continue on in the series because I enjoyed it enough that I would want to. I will be treading carefully, but I think that I will. I really like Nnedi Okorafor's work a lot. I've read quite a bit of it and recommend checking her out if you haven't already. I read Time Travelers, an anthology of Palestinian speculative fiction. I got this one as an e-arc as well. Thank you, publishers. And this is edited by my friend Sonia Suleiman. And this is a 5 stars for sure collection of speculative fiction written by Palestinian authors who live in Palestine or are part of the Palestinian diaspora. And as a collection, it is very much internally diverse. The kind of tones and subject matter and style and even genre of the stories varies widely. You know, speculative fiction can encompass a lot of different things. And I really, really enjoyed this. I will frequently say when I'm reviewing anthologies or shorts, like collections of any sort really, that inevitably some stories will stick out, you know, to any given reader more than others. Someone's going to like some stories more than others. There's no filler in Time Travelers. It is, you know, it is cover to cover solid. Did I like some stories, you know, particularly, you know, much? Of course. And I think other readers will have that experience, of course. 100%, you know, recommend. Might I be a little bit biased based on knowing the editor? Perhaps, but really, really excellent. I could not wait to go down to my friend's, you know, local bookstore and make sure that they had it on their radar to get some copies in. Really, really recommend checking out Time Travelers. I'm absolutely going to pick up hard copy. I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited to have finally gotten. I've been looking forward to Time Travelers so much. Very, very much recommend. Do read the content warnings on Storygraph or so, you know, somewhere else to just, you know, check in with that if you're concerned about particular kinds of content. So good. Such a good collection. Such a good collection. I cannot recommend enough. I told you it was going to be a rambly one. I've just rambled so long that my camera cut me off. And I am not done. I read this month, of course, Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is a reread for me, and I read it with a group of folks chatting on Discord together. I wanted to read this in July because this book begins set in July 2024. It spans several years going forward from there. I had read this quite a number of years ago now, but it's very much, you know, a book that is one to grapple with, you know, and one to engage with and one to struggle with. And reading it was almost surreal, with it being the time period that this is set in. And this is a dystopian America as a setting wherein, you know, the impacts of human-caused climate change are very stark, wherein much of the kind of infrastructure and social structures have broken down to varying degrees depending on where one is. The protagonist, Lauren, who's 15 at the start of the book and 18 or 19 by the end, is the daughter of a preacher and lives in this kind of walled-in community that exists in this kind of context where outside of those walls is chaotic and unsafe in various kinds of ways. And the book follows her journey, and over the course of her journey, she's also working on writing down this collection of ideas that she calls Earthseed. And it's aphorisms, I would say, stylistically. And these aphorisms group together into something like a path, a spiritual path or a faith or religion. The first aphorism that opens the book is quite well known. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. From Earthseed, the books of the living. And it's jarring to read a book like this that's set now. Octavia Butler knew so much about where things could go, I think. And so there's something really affecting about reading this right now. I'm reading this again right now. I got a lot more from the Earthseed components than I did the first time I read it. I think that the first time I read it, I was very much kind of reading for plot, and obviously as a reread, you don't do that so much. So intense. So intense, and so important, and so good. And reading this alongside Pantheologies was kind of interesting. It connected with a number of other things that I was reading, some of which I chose to connect with this very deliberately, and then others that it was more accidental, we'll say. This book is extraordinary. Extraordinary. There's a sequel, Parable of the Talents, and there was to be a third book, Parable of the Trickster, that never was finished. There's a bunch of false starts for that, but it's not available. I will read Parable of the Talents at some point this year. It will not be this month, even though I'm reading sequels this month. I need a breather. I need to think about this one some more. And, you know, there's more to reflect on for me here, but I will definitely read Parable of the Talents, and I'll share when I do. And if folks want to read it together, they can. I know some folks who read this and chatted with me about it in Discord are already reading Parable of the Talents. I just need a little breather. But so good and so important. I read Mirrored Heavens by Rebecca Roanhorse. Mirrored Heavens is the third and final book in a trilogy, which started with Black Sun. The second book was Fevered Star. This trilogy is a fantasy trilogy, definitely like epic scale fantasy, with magic and deities and, you know, all the things you can think of epic fantasy as having. It is set in a world that is very much inspired by indigenous Central America. And my partner and I have both been reading this series together. And I got this third, Mirrored Heavens, as an ARC just before it came out. It is out now. And so I've been looking forward to it for quite some time. And my partner's reading it now that I'm done. And I quite enjoyed this trilogy. I struggle to say much that will make much meaningful sense to people watching this video who haven't read the trilogy. Like, how do you review the third book in a trilogy without just kind of spoilering everything that led up to it? I think I was left a bit frustrated by Mirrored Heavens, if I'm honest. I feel like some parts of the trilogy and the storylines that run through it wrapped up too neatly for my preferences. And others were left too ambiguous for my preferences, which sounds like I'm just being difficult, and I probably am. There were one or two things that I felt like just happened in a really abrupt way, and then it's not clear what the ramifications of them will be. And then there was also a part of the conclusion that I felt was just like, this is way too, you know. And then it concluded. I don't know what I wanted. I don't know how I wanted this to end. I wouldn't say that I was particularly, you know, cheering for it to end in any particular kind of way. I don't tend to approach reading fiction in that way. Some aspects of the conclusion did bug me a little, if I'm honest. But this trilogy is fantastic, and if you're into, you know, lengthy fantasy trilogies with really compelling world building, multiple POV writing, some non-linear time structure, this is definitely one to check out. But you absolutely have to start with Black Sun. You cannot start in the middle of this trilogy, because the second and third books pick up right where the predecessor book left off and would make absolutely no sense. Even having read the other books, there's something, you know, in the second and third books, you kind of have to accept that you don't really know what's going on for a little while until you get back into the world. Like, if you read all three in a row, I think it would be fine, but reading them with kind of a year in between, I definitely forgot some things. I'm grateful that these books do include character lists, maps, you know, to help orient yourself a little bit. But it's a really good series. It's a really good series. Next up, I read two more books, and they're both books that I chose specifically because I was reading Parable of the Sower, and I wanted to have some context for that. So I read The Ex-Human, Science Fiction, and the Fate of Our Species by Michael Barabé. This is a academic analysis of texts that the author makes the case deal with the ex-human in some kind of a way. And some of that is alien, some of that is technological or kind of cyborg technology. There's a wide range. And he looks at, he does talk a bit about the Parable books. He talks quite a bit about Lilith's Brood trilogy by Octavia Butler, which I adore and need to reread. He talks about Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin. He talks about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick and the film adaptation Blade Runner. He talks about The Matrix films. He talks about a number of others. I came to this book having read every novel that he spends any amount of time analyzing and having seen all of the films. I think that this would be a very different read if you didn't come at it with that. Obviously, it would be spoiler-filled because it's an analysis. It's going to give you all of the details that are necessary to conduct that analysis. If you don't want spoilers for some really major science fiction works, then don't read this unless you've read all the books first. I'm not going to say I was on board with every aspect of his analysis, but there's a lot of it that I did appreciate. He also contextualizes this in the context of, writing during COVID and the experience of writing during COVID and, this massive kind of disruption to normalcy shaping his thinking in particular kinds of ways. And I liked the framing that he gave this a lot. I have not read anything by him before. I know he's written quite a bit on a number of different subjects. I enjoyed his brief discussions of teaching some of these texts as someone who has also taught authors like Octavia Butler and Ted Chiang at the university level. I appreciated the way that he talked about those experiences as well. So I enjoyed that. I also read Literary Afrofuturism in the 21st Century, edited by Isaiah Lavender III and Lisa Jasek. This is a collection of essays, scholarly essays, related to Afrofuturism and very specifically literary Afrofuturism. I've read another collection or analysis of Afrofuturism that was more wide-ranging in terms of including things like music and film. This was very much book-focused. And some of the works I had read, and some of them I had not. So there's an essay on N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy. I love that trilogy. There is a essay about Black women writing Afrofuturist texts. There's a essay about Nalo Hopkinson's The New Moon's Arms, which I have not read, but I have read Nalo Hopkinson before. There's one on young adult Afrofuturism, none of which I have read. There's an author roundtable where a bunch of different Afrofuturist or Afrofuturist adjacent authors talk about what that term means and doesn't mean, and includes and doesn't include to them, and I really liked that. That's the first piece, and it stuck with me perhaps more than most. There's a piece about Wakanda. It's really wide-ranging. Amos Tutola's The Palm Wine Drinker. There's a lot. And what I really like about a book like this, some of it was a bit of a struggle because reading an analysis of things that you haven't read is of course, a little bit of a challenge. With a book like this, I always keep a piece of paper in the back and I write down books to read, books to read, things to check out, and I got quite a list from this. So I think that this is a very good collection. If you are interested in analysis of Afrofuturist text, I would say, to pick this up. I didn't find it overwhelming having not read some of the work. Like, things are explained in a good way. I think all the authors do a good job of kind of situating the works that they're talking about, so that if you're reading someone's analysis of a novel that you haven't read, the essay still makes sense, the author's point still makes sense. So I appreciate that, and I think that the author roundtable piece, like, read it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really thoughtful, and I'm interested in this series that the book is published in, New Suns. This just feels like a series that probably has a lot of things in it that I would like to read, so I'm going to investigate that. Before I finish up on the book section, I do want to mention a conspicuous absence from the books that I've read this month. This was on my TBR. Steering the Craft, 21st Century Guide to Sailing the Sea of Story by Ursula Le Guin. This is Ursula Le Guin's kind of writing workshop-based book about writing fiction. It's full of exercises to practice writing fiction. And I've been trying to do this. I've been trying. My bookmark is in at page 8. Basically, my experience of this so far is that I got to the first writing exercise and froze up and put it down. I think I have, it's not even writer's block. It's not even writer's block, because the exercises are write a paragraph. You know, like, they're not asking you to write a novel here. I think I am being self-conscious about the idea of writing fiction, because I think I read so much fantastic, incredible, extraordinary fiction that I have so much respect for, that trying to kind of do it in a first-time way is really tripping me up. I have published academic work. I'm not unconfident in my writing abilities, at least not from any kind of technical standpoint. But I think that getting words on a page in a fiction context has really challenged me. And so I've been sitting with that and thinking about that. Like, why have I not been able to do? And the first exercise, just for context, the first exercise is write a paragraph to a page of narrative that's meant to be read aloud. Use onomatopoeia, alliteration, repetition, rhythmic effects, made up words or names or dialect, any kind of sound effect you like, but not rhyme or meter. So that has very basic has tripped me up. What has been interesting is that I have really noticed the use of things like onomatopoeia and alliteration in books that I've been reading, because I'm stuck on this. I just read, and I'll talk about it in August updates, the Book of Elsewhere, Keanu Reeves and China Miéville. Oh my goodness, one of my most anticipated releases of 2024, and there are some paragraphs to be read aloud in that book. My goodness. So this has been really tripping me up. So I've decided to attempt it again in August, and the way that I'm going to do that, to try to jolt myself out of being stuck, is to take Le Guin's suggestion in the introduction, which I wasn't originally going to take, of setting a half an hour time limit for each exercise. The other thing that I'm going to do is get off the computer. I think that being on the computer is tripping me up to some extent, because I'm very much, when I'm writing for publication, I'm an edit as you go kind of a writer. I don't draft and then rework, and I very much edit. I do everything, footnotes, everything, like, as I go, like, in their final form. So I think getting to be on paper and limiting myself in terms of time will hopefully, it'll make it a bit more of a free writing kind of exercise, but I'm hoping that this works for me. So I will check back in about that later. I will not share anything that I've written, but I will check back in. I will finish off this too long recap with a look at my wish list. And I'm just going to say my wish list has proliferated, and I may or may not have done some shopping for decks. that I'm going to be talking about having received in my next recap. So I bought 2 decks, which I will talk about as having arrived in August. So I'm not going to talk about them too much here because I haven't worked with them. I've just ordered. So I ordered the Eco Tarot, which I have not seen any YouTube content on at all, but I stumbled on and fell in love with the project, and I'm excited to talk about it when it arrives. And I ordered the Herb Crafters Tarot, which has been on and off my list for ages, and that I had a particular emotional experience with at Reader Studio in April. So I decided to go for it so that I can reconnect with that dandelion fool that we had a meditation about at Readers and get to know it. I love Joanna Powell Colbert and the Gaian Tarot, so I'm excited to look at that. Also on my wish list currently. On my wish list. Some of them, you know, I've talked about are not out yet, so I won't rehash those. Sufi Tarot is still on my wish list. It's beautiful. Is there a new Blood Moon Tarot edition coming out? Is it on my wish list? I have it written on my wish list. I think that it's going to be coming out. I signed up for the emails to find out. The Itinéraire Fantôme Oracle. This is an oracle that is a collaborative oracle that has a bunch of different artists and relates to the work of philosopher Hélène Cixous, who I have written about in grad school a bit. It's a French deck. I am very interested in this. It's pricey. It would be pricey for me to get it here in terms of shipping. But Itinéraire Fantôme very much appeals to me. Very, very, very much appeals to me. This is something I'm very intrigued by. So that is on my wish list. Signs of the Times Oracle by Crystal Banner is back on the wish list again. This had been on my wish list. I didn't get it, and now it's on the wish list again. It's mass market. I'm in zero rush, but it's on there again. And also My Friend Fire Oracle by Mari of Mari in the Sky, who did the Gentle Tarot, is on my wish list. That one has a Kickstarter coming soon page, but it's not out yet, and I'm not sure what the date will be when it's out. Whenever Mari is ready, I will be looking at that campaign with much enthusiasm. And finally, Adrienne Marie Brown's tarot deck, which has been, I think, a long time in the works and is a Black feminist tarot deck. Definitely has some Octavia Butler influence in there. This now has a preview page on Kickstarter as well. I will be looking at that Kickstarter with much enthusiasm too. So that's my wish list and my purchases, and I'm very excited. I'm excited. What's on your wish list? Tell me in the comments. I love hearing about these kinds of things. I haven't felt much desire to add to the wish list lately until this month for some reason, and I'm not sure why that is. I'm feeling invigorated in my tarot and oracle practice right now. I think maybe I'm still riding the wave of Reader Studio a little bit. Things are catching my eye a little bit more, which is not to say I'll get everything on the wish list, obviously, but things are definitely getting my attention, and I'm feeling inclined to doing some maybe tarot deck study. I do think that getting this Tarot Neocolonial de las Americas did some of this because this is, a new deck to me that has, a guidebook that I really want to delve into, and, it feels like a world, unto itself, and it has a very strong perspective, and I think that has invigorated my interest in really delving deeply into decks. So there are definitely some decks in my collection that I have kind of earmarked to be deck deep dives, and maybe there'll be a deck deep dive video or two coming, looking at those decks in my collection. But then also, you know, I think the Herb Crafter's Tarot is one that for me will look like a bit of a deep dive as well as a non-herbalist. I understand that you don't have to be an herbal expert to use the deck, but I know that I will want to, you know, read that guidebook in full as well, and I'm sure I'll have thoughts to share on that. So that's where things are at for me. If you stuck with me this long, I'm shocked. I did warn at the beginning that it would be messy and rambly. There it is. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you all again soon. Have a good one. Bye.